What do you think is going on here?
Well, what's going on is what I and you and many others have been talking about over the last several years. Me particularly have been talking about it since 2010 when I left the Democrat Party. But now folks are a little more vocal because obviously the slap in the face of Roe v. Wade has left folks who have continued to make excuses for the Democrat Party pretty much at a loss. There is no way to get around this when you look at what's happening with the post-pandemic, with economics. There's no way getting around this when we talk about Build Back Better being completely ignored. There's no way to get around the fact that Joe Biden has not used all of the power to make sure that they codify Roe versus Wade. And again, let's be reminded that this actually started with President Obama before Trump was in office. So now, folks are getting louder and louder. I have always, as you know, been a big proponent of Black voters pushing the line, demanding more because they do hold 90% of the Democrat Party. But now you're also seeing Hispanic voters get even louder. You're seeing Asian voters get even louder. And I encourage that, Bree, because for so long, when I would talk about Black voters and the importance of asking for more, folks would think that was anti, and it was not. It was actually pro the African-American community to demand more. So I encourage every community to speak up loud and clear and to not be afraid to say, no, my community wants more. That is what this is all about. Everyone is supposed to scream as loud as you possibly can and to ensure that these leaders take care of each individual community, because there are individual issues that we all deal with collectively as a group that is not the same.
And people were very upset with people like Ice Cube for saying in the lead up to the general election that Black people deserve something for their vote. Joe Biden responded to some criticism around his response to the Black Lives Matter protest by saying, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. And yet here we are. And it does seem like some of the folks who pointed out that it's not that there is a preference for Latino voters among the Democratic Party, as some Black people describe. When some Black people say, oh, the Democratic Party is more responsive to Latino voters or Asian voters, oh, you get a Stop Asian Hate bill before you have a George Floyd bill. I think what they're really perceiving is that when you have an electorate that is more willing to vote for a different party, to take their vote and go elsewhere if their needs aren't met, the party is going to be more responsive to them. And when, to your point, the Democratic Party has 90% of Black people in an unshakable grip, there is very little incentive for Democrats to actually listen to what the Black community is asking for, to the extent that we articulate specific demands. But new NBC reporting fleshes out how voters Democrats need the most are also getting hit the hardest by inflation. Polling from last month shows 79% of people who describe themselves as poor or working class said they were falling behind financially. One pollster told NBC News, quote, particularly for voters that are critical to Democrats doing well in November, younger voters, African Americans, Hispanics, these are voters who are feeling more pain than other voters, and they're looking for real solutions. Are they going to get any, Teslin?
Well, I mean, if we continue to push, they have no choice. You and I talked about this before, and I'm so glad that you brought this up to talk about, why people are leaving. Yes, and I say this to my progressive friends all the time because I am independent. Yes, raising the minimum wage is important. Yes, job security is important. But it's also important, Bree, to talk about, like I always talk about, small businesses. We're not talking about the ultra wealthy. We're not talking about the rich, but we're talking about also businesses. And Democrats have failed time and time again, and progressives, by the way, to talk about business. When we look at post-pandemic, 28%, there was a 28% increase in Black business alone. There was a 19% increase in Latino businesses. There was a 5% increase in the Asian American community just on small business, because after the pandemic, folks were sitting around saying, what do? I no longer have a job, so let me be creative and start a boutique. Let me be creative and do what it is that I've always wanted to do. We can even see with the recent Beyonce song on last week, telling folks to quit their job, to go after what it is that inspires them. So until we start actually talking about how to take care of small businesses besides just the PPP loan and how can these businesses flourish, you're going to see more folks move out of this party. I believe that more folks will continue to be independent like myself, not going to the Republican Party because I don't think that is the option. But there's a mix of folks, voters who are just leaving out of spite as a way to say, hey, win me back. Second, the voters who were Republicans all along, those who voted for Obama, then switched back to Trump, and then possibly back to Biden, and then now they're going back to Trump. And, and then those who are just saying, I want to try another option. So these polls, we really don't know how they're made up of who is who, and we'll see in November. But one thing for sure is the answer is not just, let's just get out and vote. There was an article just posted of me today saying that is a slap in the face. It is disingenuous. It is disrespectful. And basically I said that, Joe Biden is pulling a Will Smith on voters by saying that, hey, all you need to do is just go vote. And yes, that does change things on the state level, but it will not change anything on the federal level if he is not willing to what I call push the line. And as another note, because of voter suppression in various states, because of gerrymandering, no matter how many people go to the polls, states like Texas, for example, or possibly even Georgia as a whole, what happens to those Democrat voters? So to tell them, just vote, what happens, Bree, when nothing changes on the state level for those people? So what should everybody do? Just move to California? That won't work because California gas is almost $7 a gallon. So Democrats have to figure this out, and they should have figured it out a long time ago. I'm seeing a lot of blaming online. It was you progressives. It was Trump. The bottom line is President Biden is in charge right now. And so what will he do right now in this moment?
Right. There's a kernel of truth to what she's saying in that, yes, she is being tried in his stead because the criminal justice system failed to keep him alive so that he could go through this.
Right, but living or dead, she was still enormously culpable.
Absolutely culpable, has paid
she's all we got left.
Right, yeah. But and they would have presumably tried her anyway, but she's being tried as a stand-in for the man that was even more responsible and was supposed to suffer justice and will not. And also, she is right that I don't want to say she's right, but in her contention that
Robbie says Ghislaine was right.
Yeah, great. But Jeffrey Epstein, roped in all these powerful people who excused him and covered for him, and in some cases participated in the reprehensible crimes he was committing, to the extent that he was able to, he went down for this once. He was prosecuted in Florida. He got an unbelievable deal where I think it was just like house arrest for some period of time, and then was right back at it. And then at that point, he was still hobnobbing with rich, influential, powerful people. And that's the part that is crazy.
Yeah.
Like people don't vet their friends even a little bit. Like, don't vet them in the wait, were you prosecuted for child sexual exploitation?
Very publicly so.
Publicly?
And that's the thing. It's like the Harvey Weinstein story where after the fact, all of these actresses came forward and said, we all knew about Harvey Weinstein. We all knew. Mm. And yet you had things like Barack Obama letting his daughter intern for him in a world where everybody knew. And it's like, I'm not saying that, I'm not imputing knowledge to Barack Obama, but it does seem to be like at a certain level of fame and access, everyone has to have known and basically decided it's not going to happen to me / it's not my problem. I'm not the person that's being victimized or targeted, so it's not my problem.
But I guess it depends what everybody knew. It depends what the you knew thing actually was. Because with Weinstein, I remember hearing rumors. I thought it was, he was a really, touched people inappropriately.
What more do you want, Robbie?
Well, to the extent that like he made you come to his room and give you a massage before he would let you in the movie. I didn't know that. Is that what people knew?
Well, people knew that?
I
think it was Lupita Nyong'o who told a story like that. I mean, like major actresses. She talked about running out of the room when he tried that on her.
That's crazy.
Major actresses were in that exact scenario multiple times, and among themselves
I guess you'd think if the situation everybody knows, and the thing they know is that this guy is raping underage people, that they do something, but they didn't. So what do you, I guess that's...
Well, I mean, and I think you're right, that's a good point that she's making there at the end, that, it's really frustrating that I said earlier, it's not, she's all we got. She's not all we got. There are many, many people who are culpable and used her services and exploited and raped these young girls. And they're still out there. They were not named. Any number of powerful people from You know, the Clintons, 2 members of the royal family, have been pictured with both her and Epstein. And we all are still going about our business as though nothing has happened. There's a serious accountability crisis in this country, in this world, when something like this can happen. And people have no shame about sitting down with, you know, Bill Gates and having these interviews the way he's been interviewed about COVID, and to not take those interview opportunities to be asking him about this trial and his knowledge and probing them. I've seen a couple of people who have gotten the question in here.
Melinda Gates has started speaking up about
it. You know, got
good for her.
The power of a good divorce attorney is what we're seeing right there. But yeah, it is very dispiriting, and there's something that is anticlimactic about this as a consequence. It's
a reminder that you should never totally dismiss so-called conspiracy theorist type people. Got to pay attention, because every now and then something that sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, right? This sounds like, on paper, like a Pizzagate type thing. Wait, there's an island with this rich billionaire who hobnobs with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates and Donald Trump and all the rich and famous, in a bipartisan fashion, all these rich and famous people, and he has a pederasty island where his associates bring underage girls for him to rape, and he has his rich friends involved, and politically connected friends are witness, in some cases witnesses, or the royal family of England is involved. Like, that sounds crazy, but it's true.
Well, that's the
in
thing.
This case, it all turned out to be true.
I think we disagree a little bit on that, and so because it depends on what your lens of what seems unlikely is. The idea of, you know, to me, there's a difference between like a Pizzagate and the idea of people who are very rich exploiting the vulnerability of people who are not, and people who are minors, and people who, for many reasons, don't have anywhere near the same level of power or authority they have. And I don't find that to be conspiratorial, because that's just the way the world is. That's the way the world operates. And I'm sorry, like thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of girls and young boys across the world who are experiencing this kind of abuse on a daily, regular, serialized way, and whose stories will never get told or never get covered, because the people who are perpetrating them aren't as famous or rich, or, you know, don't have as much visibility. And so when I do hear that someone rich is a pedophile and has been able to get away with it for years, that actually sounds deeply plausible in the worst way.
Well, Fauci has COVID again. He's experiencing a rebound case after taking Pfizer's treatment drug Paxlovid. Here he is talking about it.
Thank you so much. I remember the last time that we interviewed you, you told us that you were staying away from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You said that given your age, you felt it was potentially risky. And unfortunately, just weeks later, you ended up getting COVID yourself. Are you doing any better now?
Well, yes, I am. But I've had an interesting course that I think is becoming more and more typical the more clinical experience we get. I turned positive about 2 weeks ago with very minimal symptoms. When they increased, given my age, I went on Paxlovid for 5 days, and I felt really quite well, just a bit of rhinorrhea and fatigue. And after I finished the 5 days of Paxlovid, I reverted to negative on an antigen test for 3 days in a row. And then on the 4th day, just to be absolutely certain, I tested myself again, and I reverted back to positive by the antigen test. So it was sort of what people are referring to as a Paxlovid rebound. And then over the next day or so, I started to feel really poorly, much worse than in the first go around. So I went back on Paxlovid, and right now I am on my 4th day of a 5-day course of my 2nd course of Paxlovid. And fortunately, I feel reasonably good. I mean, I'm not completely without symptoms, but I certainly don't feel acutely ill.
Okay, so he caught COVID, had minor symptoms, then his symptoms started to get worse, so he started a round of Paxlovid. He then felt better and tested negative for a few days, and then suddenly he tested positive. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you remember, we talked about Paxlovid's rebound COVID problem about 6 weeks ago after late night host Stephen Colbert also came down with a rebound case. And at the time, Pfizer and experts were claiming it was very rare. And in Stephen Colbert's case, the rebound wasn't as bad as the initial round of COVID. So there were questions about whether or not a rebound case was even truly COVID or whether or not people were contagious. At least that's what they were claiming. But people online having real-world experiences were saying otherwise. People were claiming it was way more common than just rare and that the second wave of the virus was often worse. But those stories were dismissed. Now we have Fauci telling this same story. And I'll give him props for being transparent about his symptoms and telling us the truth. But those props are short-lived because here comes Fauci with another one of his noble lies. According to the New York Times, Fauci says he believes Paxlovid kept him out of the hospital even though he tested positive again. The article reads, Fauci sought on Wednesday to discourage doubts about the antiviral drug Paxlovid after disclosing that he had suffered what appeared to be a rebound of COVID-19 after taking a 5-day course of the pills. Paxlovid did what it was supposed to do, Dr. Fauci, 81, said in an interview, saying that he believed that the treatment made by Pfizer kept him out of the hospital when he first tested positive for the virus on June 15th. He added that he thought the drug also reduced the severity of his initial symptoms. So here's Fauci telling us there's no issue with Pfizer's treatment drug because he wants to discourage doubts. Just tell us the truth. Don't try to tell us stories to keep our hopes up in Pfizer's pocketbook lined. The fact is, he had a rebound case that was worse than his initial bout of symptoms. Studies show rebound cases of COVID are, in fact, very, very rare in people who don't take this treatment drug. An initial recent study surrounding the drug shows rebound cases are not rare. In fact, in one study of a handful of people, several of the rebound cases were within one family group. And how can he say it was Paxlovid that kept him out of the hospital? He's taken 4 doses of the COVID vaccine. He's been telling us it's the vaccine that will keep us safe and out of the hospital. So which is it? How are people supposed to continue trusting anything Fauci says when it was 2 doses, then 3, then 4, then add a round of Paxlovid, then add a second round and still end up sick? Granted, he's not dead and he's 81, so I guess there's that. Fact is, they speak with authority about knowing what these drugs and vaccines do and don't do, and then they persuade the population and even turn us against one another. And in reality, it's all still very much unknown. Take a look at Dr. Peter Hotez. He's a medical expert who appears regularly on MSNBC. We've had him here on Rising. He also experienced one of the supposed very rare cases of Paxlovid rebound. Here's his tweet thread about the experience. Well, thought COVID was over, finished 5 days of Paxlovid, felt well, 2 negative antigen tests, 5 days later up this AM, lots of rhinorrhea, sore throat, antigen tests screaming positive. So either this post-Paxlovid relapse is real, something unique to BA.2.12, although can't confirm, or something. Well, we'll eventually figure this out, but still a puzzle. I don't feel that terrible. It's like a bad cold, still doing Zooms, interviews, writing. Will a second course of Paxlovid help? Not much of a roadmap. Until I figure this out, watching Respect, Aretha Franklin movie. Great music. Thank goodness for our COVID vaccinations. I can only imagine if we didn't have them. Well, first of all, he's admitting here that there are many unknowns and they're working to solve a puzzle. It isn't settled science. Secondly, if the vaccines work, why even take Paxlovid? Lastly, do we trust and follow data and science? Because the fact is, the clinical trials that allowed Paxlovid authorization for use were done on unvaccinated, high-risk patients, not 4-time jabbed Stephen Colbert, Anthony Fauci, or Peter Hotez. These men are taking the drug off-label without any clinical data to back up its use for them, and yet Fauci doesn't want to dissuade people from using it. It may very well be true that the rebound cases do not happen in the unvaccinated who take Paxlovid, the group it was designed for and tested on. But many people are taking it who've been vaccinated over and over. Do they trust the vaccines or not? Do they follow science and the data or not? Because at this point, the answer to both of these questions seems to be no. The real response is, these guys are throwing the kitchen sink at COVID, and they have no idea which thing that saved them, if any of them at all. They lambasted and ridiculed others who were willing to try anything and everything, and apparently it's only okay to experiment with off-label drugs when it's promoted by big science and big pharma.